There is something I have never said out loud to anybody except my wife. The morning she told me she was not coming back to America, she was standing barefoot on a little tiled balcony in Tagaytay, holding a chip blue mug of coffee. The fog was lifting over the ridge. A rooster was making a racket somewhere behind the house, and the smell of garlic rice was drifting up from the kitchen below us. She looked at me as calm as I had ever seen her and said, "You can fly home next week if you still want to. I'm staying." 6 months earlier, that same woman had cried in our driveway and told me I was destroying our marriage by taking her to the Philippines. 6 months. That was all it took for the person most determined to leave to become the one who refused to go. My name is Walter Bennett. I am 70 years old, originally from Dayton, Ohio, and I spent 38 years working in purchasing and inventory control for an automotive parts company. I was the man who knew the cost of everything: bearings, steel, freight, overtime, storage, insurance. Give me a spreadsheet in 10 quiet minutes, and I could tell you where every dollar was going. What I could not tell you was where our life was going. My wife, Linda, and I had been married 42 years. We raised 2 daughters, paid off a modest house, took 1 beach vacation most summers, and did all the ordinary things people say will make retirement feel secure. We saved, we avoided debt, we bought used cars. We never lived like rich people because we were not rich people. Then I retired, and within a year, the numbers stopped feeling safe. Our property taxes went up, our health insurance changed. Groceries cost more every month. The furnace needed replacing. One of our daughters was going through a divorce, and we were quietly helping with school clothes and aftercare for our grandson. None of these things ruined us by itself. That was the problem. It was death by 100 reasonable expenses. Our combined Social Security and my small pension brought in a little over $4,200 a month. On paper, that sounded fine. In real life, after insurance, utilities, taxes, food, prescriptions, car costs, and helping family, we were often left with less than $300. That was our margin for a broken appliance, a dental bill, a trip to see family, or one bad surprise. I started waking up at 3 in the morning. Linda would be asleep beside me, and I would stare at the ceiling doing calculations in my head. If the roof lasted 5 more years, if the car lasted 3, if neither of us needed serious care, if inflation slowed down, if our daughters did not need more help, then maybe we would be all right. That is not security. That is a stack of ifs. Linda did not want to hear it. I do not mean she was careless. She had spent her whole life being careful. But to her, leaving Ohio meant leaving our daughters, our church, our doctors, her sister, her garden, and every familiar road she had driven for 40 years. When I first mentioned the Philippines, she laughed because she thought I was joking. I wish I could say I discovered the idea through careful research. The truth is, I found it at 1:17 in the morning because I could not sleep. A video came up about an American retiree renting a 2-bedroom house in the Philippines for less than we paid each month in property tax, insurance, and utilities back home. I watched one video, then another, then another. I know. Famous last words. By sunrise, I had watched a retired teacher shop at a public market, a widower explain his medical costs, and a couple from Arizona show a small house surrounded by fruit trees. They did not look wealthy. They did not look reckless. They looked relieved. That word stayed with me, relieved. For the next 3 months, I researched in secret, not because I wanted to deceive Linda, but because I knew one half-formed sentence would make the whole idea sound ridiculous. I joined expat forums, I read government travel pages, I watched videos from people who loved the country and people who regretted moving there. I made lists of visa rules, hospitals, rental prices, weather patterns, banking options, and flight costs. I also read every scam story I could find: property schemes, romance schemes, business partnerships that went bad, retirees who arrived thinking every smiling stranger was their new best friend. I was not looking for paradise, I was looking for the catch. There were catches, plenty of them. Foreigners cannot simply live by American assumptions. Heat changes your day, traffic changes your patience, paperwork moves differently. Family expectations can be complicated. Imported products are expensive. Power can flicker. You have to know where you are allowed to own property and where you are not. You have to keep your head. But every place has catches. Ohio had catches too. They just came in envelopes with official logos. When I finally showed Linda the spreadsheet, she did not even look at the totals. She looked at me like I had betrayed her. "You are serious," she said. I told her I was not asking to move forever. I proposed 6 months. We would rent out our house to a family from our church whose home was being rebuilt after a fire. We would store only what mattered, take 2 suitcases each, and try life in the Philippines without buying anything or making permanent promises. She said no. I showed her the budget. No. I showed her hospital options near Manila and in nearby cities. No. I showed her video calls from expat couples. No. Then she said the sentence that hurt more than I expected. "You are trying to run away because you failed at retirement." Maybe part of me was running. I had worked my entire adult life believing that discipline would produce safety. When retirement came, I felt ashamed that our careful little plan could be weakened by taxes, insurance, and ordinary bad luck. I felt like I had miscalculated the most important purchase order of my life. But I was not running from Linda. I was trying to save the years we had left from becoming a long argument about money. We fought for weeks, not screaming fights. Worse than that. Quiet breakfasts, closed cabinet doors, answers made of one word. Our daughters took Linda's side at first. One asked whether I had met someone online. The other said I was having a late-life crisis. I told them there was no other woman, no secret investment, no fantasy resort. I wanted 6 months in a rented house. That was it. The turning point came after Linda cracked a tooth on a popcorn kernel. The estimate for the crown was more than $1,600 after insurance. We sat in the car outside the dentist's office and she started crying. Not because of the tooth, because she knew I was going to open the spreadsheet again, and she was tired of being afraid of every number. She finally said, 6 months, but I am coming home after 6 months. I agreed before she could change her mind. We chose Tagaytay because it was cooler than Manila, close enough to major hospitals and the airport, and quieter than the places most retirement videos talked about. I also liked that it did not feel built entirely around foreigners. There were weekend crowds and tourist spots, yes, but there were also schools, churches, hardware stores, neighborhood bakeries, and families living ordinary lives. Our first mistake happened before we even landed. I booked the cheapest flight combination I could find with a long layover and terrible seats. By the time we reached Manila, Linda's ankles were swollen, neither of us had slept, and one suitcase had not arrived. The heat outside the airport felt like someone had opened an oven full of wet towels. Linda looked at me and said, "This is your dream." I had no answer. The drive south took longer than expected. Motorcycles moved through gaps I could not see. Buses seemed to stop wherever they pleased. Horns did not always mean anger. Sometimes they meant hello, sometimes move, sometimes I am here. Please do not kill me. By the time we climbed toward Tagaytay, the air cooled and rain began tapping against the windows. Our rental was not the place from the photos. Technically, it was the same house. The photos had simply been taken on its best day, from its best angles before a damp stain spread across the bedroom wall. The kitchen was smaller than our old laundry room. The water pressure had 2 settings, weak and imaginary. A neighbor's rooster began announcing the morning at 4:12. Linda sat on the edge of the bed and said, "I will give you 6 months because I promised. Do not ask me for 1 day more." The rent was 28,000 pesos a month, about $480 at the time, for a furnished 2-bedroom house with a small balcony. Back in Ohio, our property tax, home insurance, utilities, and basic maintenance averaged more than 3 times that before we bought a single bag of groceries. Still, cheap is not the same as comfortable. The first 2 weeks were rough. Linda hated the humidity. She hated not knowing which brands to buy. She hated being stared at, even when the looks were only curiosity. She missed her coffee creamer, her church friends, and the way our grocery store arranged everything in the same aisles for 20 years. I made things worse by trying to explain every inconvenience. When the internet cut out, I explained the weather. When the delivery driver could not find the house, I explained the address system. When ants appeared near the sugar jar, I explained tropical living. Finally, Linda said, "Walter, I do not need a tour guide. I need my husband." That shut me up, so I stopped selling the Philippines to her. We began living one day at a time. In the mornings, we walked to a small bakery where warm Pandazol came out in brown paper bags. The woman behind the counter started setting aside the softer rolls because Linda had a temporary tooth cap. A tricycle driver named Jun learned our usual route and would wave whenever he passed. The woman next door, Marites, brought us a bowl of chicken tinola after Linda mentioned she had a cold. None of these things were dramatic. That is why they mattered. Back home, our days had become efficient and lonely. We drove from garage to parking lot, walked through automatic doors, used self-checkout, and went home. In Tagaytay, simple errands kept turning into conversations. Linda remained suspicious of everyone at first. She had read the scam stories too. If somebody was friendly, she wondered what they wanted. That caution was not entirely wrong, but slowly she learned the difference between being careful and being closed. The biggest change came in our third month. We attended a small English language service after Linda saw a handwritten notice at a cafe. The room had plastic chairs, 2 electric fans, and a keyboard that sounded slightly out of tune. There were Filipinos, a British man with his Filipino wife, an Australian widow, and 3 American retirees. Nobody asked us for money. Nobody tried to recruit us into a property deal. They asked where we were from and whether we needed help finding a dentist. After the service, a woman named Grace invited Linda to a weekly gathering where several women packed meal boxes for older residents living alone. Linda almost refused. Then she went once. The next week, she went without me. That was the first time I saw her leave the house in the Philippines because she wanted to, not because I had planned something. She came back carrying a plastic container of pancit and talking so fast I could barely follow her. Grace's daughter was training to be a nurse. Another woman had lived in California for 9 years. An elderly neighbor needed help sorting her medications. Linda had spent 30 years as a receptionist in a family medical practice, and suddenly skills she thought had retired with her were useful again. Useful. That word did something to her. At home, our daughters loved us, but they were busy building their own lives. We were invited to birthdays, school events, and holiday dinners. We were needed sometimes, but often in the practical way, a family needs an extra driver, an emergency check, or a little money. In Tagaytay, Linda began feeling valued for who she was, not only for what she could provide. She helped Grace organize a list of medicine schedules for 5 older women. She showed someone how to call a clinic and ask the right questions. She started bringing banana bread to the Friday gathering, using a small countertop oven that heated the kitchen like a furnace. I watched her become louder. That may sound strange, but Linda had grown quiet in the last few years. In Ohio, she worried about interrupting. She worried about being a burden. She worried our daughters were too busy. In that little community room with the electric fans, she laughed from her stomach again. Meanwhile, the numbers were working. Our groceries averaged around 18,000 pesos a month, roughly $310, including imported coffee and a few American comforts. Electricity varied because of the air conditioner, but our total monthly spending, rent included, stayed near $1,700. We ate out twice a week. We paid for rides instead of owning a car. We had room for dental care, short trips, and emergencies. For the first time since retirement, money remained in the account at the end of the month. Not $10, not $300, more than $2,000. I showed Linda the total after month 4. She stared at the screen and said, "Check it again." I checked it again. Then she asked the question I had been afraid to ask. What happens to us when the 6 months are over? I told her the truth. I wanted to stay, but I would return with her if that was what she chose. The experiment had to be real for both of us. Otherwise, it was just me winning an argument. She did not answer. For the next several weeks, she started making 2 lists. I did not know about them at first. One list was titled Reasons to Go Home. The other was Reasons to Stay. On the home list, she wrote our daughters, grandson, familiar doctors, sister, church, house, seasons, and privacy. On the stay list, she wrote less stress, grace, purpose, walking, fresh food, no winter, affordable dentist, time together, and not being afraid of bills. Then she added one line at the bottom, I like myself here. When she showed me, I had to look away for a moment. We called our daughters together. We expected anger, but they surprised us. They had noticed the change too. Linda looked healthier on video. I had stopped complaining about expenses. We were not calling to solve problems. We were calling to tell stories. Our oldest daughter said, "Mom, I have not heard you laugh like this in years." Our youngest asked whether we could come home for 3 months each summer instead of moving back permanently. That simple question opened a door neither of us had seen. We did not have to choose one country and erase the other. We could build a life between them. The final week of our 6-month trial arrived with heavy rain. The balcony tiles stayed damp. Clouds swallowed the view. Our return tickets were booked for Tuesday. I began packing. Linda did not. At first I thought she was avoiding it. Then on Saturday morning she carried that chipped blue mug onto the balcony. The rooster was shouting. Someone nearby was frying garlic. Fog moved through the trees below us. She said, "You can fly home next week if you still want to. I'm staying." I laughed because I thought she was teasing me. She was not. She had already called the airline. We could change the tickets for a fee. She wanted to stay another 4 months, then visit Ohio for the summer. She wanted to keep helping Grace. She wanted to find a better rental with stronger water pressure and fewer ants. She wanted our daughters to come for Christmas. Then she said, "Do not look so proud. You are still wrong about the cheap flight." She was right about that. We have been living this way for almost 2 years now, most of the year in the Philippines, part of the summer in Ohio. It is not perfect. We miss birthdays. Flights are exhausting. Bureaucracy can test a marriage. Some days the heat gets to us, and some nights I would give anything for our old mattress. But the fear is gone. We are no longer waiting for one large expense to knock us sideways. Linda has people who expect her on Fridays. I have time to read, walk, and help a neighbor with his small hardware business records. Our daughters say we are more present now, even from farther away, because we are not constantly tense. The strangest part is that I thought I was bringing Linda to the Philippines to save our retirement. The Philippines gave Linda something I had not even known she had lost, a place where she felt useful, a place where she liked herself. Sometimes early in the morning, I step onto that balcony before she wakes up. The tiles are cool under my feet. The ridge is hidden in fog. The rooster begins at 4:12 like he has a contract. Then Linda comes outside with her blue mug, looks over the railing, and starts telling me what she has planned for the day. 6 months earlier, she had stood in our driveway crying because she believed I was taking her away from her life. She was right about one thing. I did take her away from that life. I just did not know she would be the one who chose not to go back.